Welcome to Fireside Chats with Mats. So I ended the last episode talking about mind control words by referencing like another word or other words or whatever that are similarly dangerous. And of course, when you hear someone describe a word or like even a manner of speaking as quote dangerous unquote, that person often comes off sounding like a big Puritan and even like a truly dangerous person in themselves, because that might be the kind of person that would form a net with other people to choke down the freedom of speech of everyone in a given society. And it's, even though freedom of speech has kind of become a meme and stuff, nevertheless, it is sort of like, I think that is a real concern, in terms of like, is this person just going to be another drone who's helping pull society off of the cliff? And so it's, and the thing is, like, Michael Malice referred to sort of NPCs, or like, your average person who doesn't really look too deeply into things, but kind of simultaneously holds forth about things as if they're sure of them. Like, well, maybe he wasn't even referring to that person so much as like an apathetic person, but I think he might have been referring to that kind of person, the kind of person who will just like fall in line, and maybe not like extreme in all cases at all, but who will fall in line and sort of adamantly stay in line without particularly thinking about what they're doing. And he refers, like he said, those people are just like trees, basically. Similar to the T.S. Eliot thing, where it's like the readers of the night evening, the Saturday Evening Post sway in the wind like a field of ripe corn or something. Like, basically, these people, there's no point like getting too angry at them, because it's not like they're individually saying, I'm standing up for evil. It's more like they're kind of maybe doing a quick calculation and saying, this is the tide of the culture, and either I'm not going to look into this beyond any kind of like basic or even subtle mind control that gets me to support it or to hate it. Or maybe they're just like, I don't really care that much about this topic, but on some level, maybe not totally consciously, but perhaps on some level, it's like, even though I don't care about something, I'm going to act as if I care about it and even generate some kind of real emotion about it, even though I know nothing about it and I couldn't actually, like, I couldn't describe it to you, but I care so much about it. Like, Donald Trump's going to be the president. It's going to be really bad. That was something that I got sucked into. And it's like, and like to the point where like I was hanging out with my cousin and one of her friends, and her friend said something about like seeing a Trump bumper sticker on a car and saying like, oh, here, let me like fix that for you, and like doing a kicking motion or something, not actually at a car, but she was talking about like having seen a car maybe, or she was responding to somebody else mentioning some kind of Trump bumper sticker. And I remember feeling like, yeah, like, oh, good, like she gets it. She gets that Donald Trump is a bad guy, because Louis C.K. wrote this article saying everyone should be really scared of Trump, and I sent that article to my dad, and saying, it's Louis C.K., it's Louis, he's one of the stars, as Alan Watt would say. I wouldn't have known who Alan Watt was. I would have said, you mean Alan Watts? As Alan Watt would say, we follow the stars, and Louis C.K. said really to be concerned about this. But of course, I didn't look into it enough to even like probably closely read what he wrote at all. I'm not sure if I totally finished reading it before sending it to my dad. I don't know if I ever did, but I read some of it at least. And it's like the thing is, like, I couldn't really honestly feel too strongly about Trump, because like I really wouldn't have been able to like tell you anything practical that had anything to do with him being president or not. I still couldn't really tell you that, because it's, it seems like that's sort of a figurehead kind of deal. But either way, I still like got riled up, and like to the point of like yelling at some points, your average like anti-Trump yelling shenanigans, even yelling about how bad Trump is and whatever. And it's like, so in any case, I've been through it too. But in any case, I'm not sure I'm going to get quite back to the track that I was on, but what I was going to talk about in this mind control words episode is the sexualization of the language in general. So there is a sexualization of the language where I don't know if this was the case when I was a kid and I didn't realize it, but throughout the course of my life, it seems like basically every normal word has now taken on at least some kind of sexual undertone to the point where it doesn't matter if you're talking to your dear old mother or you're talking to your boss or you're talking to your old friends. You know, it doesn't matter whom you're talking to, if you say basically any word, then unless it's just like sort of like an article of speech, like or the or something, if you say like even those, who knows? But if you say any word, there is going to be like some kind of sexual subtext, like take this pencil and write something down, or like real bad one is the word come. Like anytime you say like I came over as fast as I could, or like I'm gonna come over or something, like that word is like a real word with real function, and it's just totally tarnished by this thick sexual subtext that it seems to not have had all of my life. Like it seems to have really things have really taken on this sexual subtext in the past, like maybe like 5 or 10 years, like really hardcore, but like essentially it seemed when I was younger it would be like, oh, Beavis and Butthead kind of, and I didn't watch Beavis and Butthead back then, but you know, kind of joking like oh, like you said pencil, that's funny because pencil is also a phallic object maybe, and then that's like a penis and it sounds like penis, pencil, penis, you know. But it's just like essentially it seemed like it was just sort of like kind of a jokey kind of like teenage thing to do. I'd say edgy, but now the term edgy seems to have been soiled, and now it's like if you call something edgy, then that's like a term of distaste, and essentially if you use the word edgy to refer to something now, it seems to be painting that entire thing with a sense of there just being controversial for controversy's sake. And so basically, anything that now you refer to as edgy, especially if you do it with a certain tone of voice, yes, Metal Meltdown, I'm pointing to you. If you refer to something as edgy, now basically you have stripped it of any possibility in, you know, at least in the presentation of it in your speech, you have essentially like stripped it of any possibility of being sincere about what it's saying. And perhaps something is being sincere and saying something controversial. Perhaps something is saying something that not a lot of people are saying, and thus it comes off as controversial because it's not something that's commonly said. And, you know, in other venues, you might say that the things that are not commonly said are often the things that really need to be said. Except now, instead of looking at what something is saying, the term edgy can be applied to it, and suddenly whatever it said is totally lost. And then beyond that, any impact of what it said is just converted into the impact of something being obnoxious for obnoxious sake, like just basically being loud and yelling just to cause attention, rather than this person actually maybe having something that they actually wanted to say with their new metal album or with their new book. But anyway, let's get back to the sexualization of the language thing. So the sexualization of the language earlier in my life, and this, you know, it may just have been that I was starting to realize that everything had like these potentially sexual undertones, and like I was just starting to realize that it was there, but it had been there. But the thing is, I'm not totally sure about that because yes, like the term "cum" has had like a sexual meaning for almost certainly like, you know, longer than I've been alive. Like, you know, like I think there's like there's a porn movie called Pump Me Full of Cum, and I think that's like, I think that might be from before I was born, but that's a strange context to say different things in. But in any case, well, there you go though. Like you could look at these things and it's just like, oh, it's funny. Like, oh, you're just putting two things together, and one of them is sort of inappropriate for social situations according to our cultural standards. And I would say like actual standards, in the sense that you don't want to go around just saying really sexual things and then like playing with people's like emotions and stuff, and having people feel like sense of like shame and like fear and like exposure everywhere you go, because you're saying all these sexual things and you're really changing the atmosphere and kind of pulling people into these situations where now the topic is a sexual topic, and so you're sort of inviting them to respond, or if they don't respond, then now they're sort of like doing committing some kind of act by not responding to what you said, and so you're like dragging people into this like a situation of like, talking about sexuality, and sexuality is like sacred, and it is something that should be like, maybe not like turned away from, or but it's something that you don't want to just be like flaunting everywhere. And by the way, flaunting, not flouting. It's so annoying when people are messing up words left and right these days, though. It keeps getting worse and worse. It seems like people will just they'll go for the wrong word. They'll favor the wrong word over the right word, but like do it in a sense where it's like they're not like, they think they're not sure which one to use, and then they just emphatically use the wrong one, or they just consistently use the wrong, whatever. But anyway, um, yeah, the whole thing, the sexualization of the language it's what the situation that I sketched out with like people like dragging people like, or kind of like pulling people, sort of creating tense like sexual situations by like bringing things up in public. It's like, in a certain sense, when you use the word inappropriate or something, you sound like a Puritan. And I mean, some people may indeed be puritanical to like an unhelpful extent, or like a sort of a controlling extent, in a way that's like going beyond just social good graces and whatever. But it's like, truly there are like situations where there are things where like if you said them in a social situation, it would really like suddenly everyone in the room would be like sort of thrown in. You would have created a situation where now everyone in the room uh, sort of has become a part of like responding to or not responding to what you said. And you might say like, well, Matt, that's just them projecting that they're in a situation, and they wouldn't necessarily like they're just standing there in the room, like it's just now, they don't have to respond at all. And it's like, yeah, of course they don't have to respond, and like it's good to bring up that side of the argument. But at the same time, like say people are working together on some kind of work project or something, and they're making progress, or they're just doing whatever they're doing, and then somebody like brings up like an obscene like, or just like a really explicit sexual topic. Now suddenly the whole vibe is like, suddenly this has been introduced, and like it's a topic where people may have a range of feelings, like a whole, and it's a topic where again it's like something sacred that I would say shouldn't be flaunted carelessly in the open, or just it's like, but again it's also a sense of like, it's sort of like of kind of feels like a violation of everyone in the room, similarly to if you were in a similar situation and somebody's like wife had cheated on them, and they were going through like a divorce or something, and you like said like, hey, did your wife cheat on you again this weekend? Like, if you, I mean, that would be hilarious, perhaps because of how incredibly forward, like incredibly just blunt it would be. But imagine if you said something like that. Like suddenly the situation would be so incredibly tense. And so now let's go to what I was saying about the sexualization of the language. It seems like almost every conversation you have will inevitably hit like 3 to 5, if not more, sexual undertones based on you using normal words for things. And I think that it seems to have intensified over my lifetime, and it seems like potentially through maybe movies like American Pie, or like even shows like Beavis and Butthead, like potentially it's just become such a meme in our society to point out every potential sexual subtext, but not only that, to make some kind of sexual slang out of every extra word, whether it's thirsty. Oh, now thirst means that you're sexually intoxicated or something. Or whether it's like, oh, like like the word cake, like cake, like birthday cake. It's like, oh no, now cake means somebody's ass. She's got cake. Oh, or like, or like the like any just basically like it's so many terms, and I'm sure you could name like a dozen if you just sat there and thought about it, but there are so many slang terms that are created from words that used to be innocuous, and these, or at least somewhat innocuous, and then these words are like given this cultural stamp of sexuality.